Welcome back to True Crime Documentary YouTube channel. On the morning of May 26, 2018, a staff member at Willow Ridge Academy, a prestigious boarding school located in a quiet corner of the West Midlands, stumbled upon a scene that would leave the community shaken. As she walked through the dormitory building, Christelle, a supervisor, noticed something strange at the base of the stairs. An eerie silence in the hallways and dark strands of hair scattered on the floor. Initially thinking it was nothing, her thoughts were interrupted as she walked past the stairs, spotting a green nylon rope tied tightly to the railing. As Christelle's gaze moved upward, her breath caught in her throat. A pair of white socks dangled lifelessly above the floor, the body of 17-year-old Charlotte Charlie Hogan hanging from the staircase. Her discovery was the beginning of a series of events that would spiral into a chilling investigation. Just minutes later, authorities discovered the body of a second victim, her best friend, Lara McCarthy. What initially appeared to be a tragic double suicide began to unravel into something far darker as subtle inconsistencies began to emerge. Soon, the school community realized that the deaths were not just a tragic accident, but the work of someone with an obsessive, dangerous fixation. Charlotte Hogan, known as Charlie, had always lived a life divided between two worlds. Born on a farm in the rural West Midlands, she had grown up surrounded by animals and the pastoral calm of her father's cattle ranch. Her family life had been complex. Charlie's parents, Ronnie and Anna, had divorced when she was young, but both had remained amicable, co-parenting her between their homes. While her father worked on the farm, her mother, Sonia, managed a small tourism lodge near a scenic resort area. Charlie spent 3 weeks a month on the farm with her father and 1 week with her mother, but this pattern changed when she was enrolled at Willow Ridge Academy. After moving into the academy, Charlie's relationship with her mother grew distant. Her time at the boarding school became her new reality, far from the comforts of her rural upbringing. It was during this time that her friendship with Lara McCarthy, once distant due to the demands of life, was reignited. The two girls, who had shared childhood memories and were once inseparable, found themselves growing close again, bonding over shared classes and their love for nature. Both had been raised in farming families and understood the challenges and beauty of that life. Lara's family, too, had strong connections to farming traditions, living on a farm about an hour away from Willow Ridge. Her father, Stefan, a respected drilling specialist, was known for his steady hand and calm demeanor, while her mother, Renette, worked as a caregiver. Their family was well known in the community for their strong values, and their lives seemed peaceful and stable. However, beneath the surface, both girls carried their own secrets and struggles. Everything changed when Xander came into the picture. He was 18 years old, a recent graduate from Willow Ridge, and his athletic build and confident demeanor immediately drew Charlie's attention. Tall, with thick dark hair and striking green eyes, he seemed like the type of person everyone admired. Xander had a complicated history. His parents, Monty and Marcia, had divorced when he was young, and his upbringing had been split between two homes. Xander's father, Monty, was a former police officer and had a strict, almost militaristic approach to raising him. Meanwhile, his mother, Marcia, who had struggled to conceive for years, was overly protective of him, seeing him as a miracle child. Xander's early years had been marked by a series of behavioral challenges. At school, he was known for his success in rugby, but also for his temper, which frequently led to arguments and confrontations. His relationships with teachers and peers were often strained, and it wasn't uncommon for Xander to lash out when he felt slighted. Despite these tendencies, he was charismatic and had a magnetic pull on those around him, especially young women. It was this allure that caught Charlie's attention. At first, their relationship was innocent. They began to spend more time together, going on walks, attending events, and exchanging messages. Xander showered Charlie with attention, buying her gifts and complimenting her constantly. He seemed genuinely caring and attentive, and for Charlie, it was a new and exciting experience. But as their bond deepened, Xander's darker side started to emerge. Charlie's friends, particularly Lara, began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. The once confident and vibrant Charlie was becoming more withdrawn. She began to isolate herself from her circle of friends, spending more time with Xander. At first, Lara didn't want to overstep, but the tension in their friendship was palpable. It wasn't long before Charlie stopped answering her messages as often, and when they did talk, she seemed distracted, uncomfortable, almost like she was hiding something. Xander's behavior took a darker turn after their relationship became more serious. Initially, it was small things, calls at odd hours, unnecessary visits to Charlie's school, and texts that seemed a little too persistent. But as time passed, Xander's fixation intensified. He began showing up at places Charlie frequented, even when she hadn't mentioned she'd be there. At first, Charlie dismissed it as coincidence, but soon it became clear that Xander was tracking her every move. By the time the couple had been dating for a few months, Charlie had started to feel trapped. Xander would demand to know who she was with and where she was at all times. He would grow jealous if she spoke to other guys, and even though she reassured him repeatedly, his jealousy only grew stronger. This controlling behavior began to take its toll on her. Charlie started withdrawing from friends and even stopped seeing her family as frequently. She didn't want to upset Xander, but at the same time, she began to realize she had no space left for herself. Despite her discomfort, she tried to break things off with him multiple times, but Xander wouldn't take no for an answer. He would beg her, plead with her, even threaten to harm himself if she left him. Charlie, in her kindness and fear, would always relent, convincing herself that things would get better, but they never did. Things came to a head one fateful night in late March 2018, when Xander, having been rejected again by Charlie, sent her a message that would haunt her forever. "You'll regret this. I won't let you go. I can't live without you." It wasn't just words. It was a threat. As April rolled in, Xander's obsession with Charlie became undeniable. She could no longer chalk up his actions to simple jealousy or emotional instability. He had crossed into something far more dangerous. One evening, Charlie was at a local cafe with her friends when she saw Xander standing outside, staring at her through the window. His gaze was intense, his expression unreadable. It made her skin crawl. She quickly excused herself and left, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her, waiting for her to slip up. Xander's attempts to control her grew more blatant. He would show up at her house unannounced, standing on her doorstep, demanding to speak to her. Charlie's family was growing increasingly worried. Her father, Ronnie, started noticing the changes in her behavior. She had become more anxious, more distant. He began to ask questions, but Charlie would always deflect, telling him everything was fine. The breaking point came when Charlie and her best friend, Marna, went out for a weekend trip to a nearby town in early May. Xander found out where they were staying and showed up, uninvited, demanding that Charlie leave with him. When she refused, he grew violent. He screamed at her, accusing her of betraying him, of choosing Marna over him. Charlie, terrified, tried to calm him down, but Xander wouldn't listen. Marna stepped in, telling Xander to leave, but he didn't care. That night, Charlie confided in Marna about how bad things had gotten. She admitted that she was afraid of Xander and didn't know how to get him to leave her alone. She had tried everything, but it was clear he wasn't going to stop. The fear in her voice was unmistakable, and Marna promised to stand by her no matter what. But neither of them could have predicted just how far Xander would go to make sure Charlie was his, and his alone. In the days following the confrontation, Charlie's unease deepened. Her attempts to maintain normalcy were futile, as the relentless presence of Xander shadowed her every move. It was clear that he would not let her go, and she was no longer sure how to protect herself. She became increasingly withdrawn, confiding only in Marna and Brandon, her boyfriend, who was growing more worried by the day. The night of May 24th, 2018, was particularly tense. Charlie, Marna, and Brandon were sitting in their dormitory room, trying to keep things light, despite the undercurrent of fear that had taken hold of Charlie. They were talking, trying to distract themselves from the mounting stress, but then, just after midnight, Charlie's phone rang. The screen lit up with Xander's name, and everyone in the room went silent. Charlie hesitated before answering, her hand trembling as she put the call on speakerphone. Xander's voice, smooth and persuasive, came through first. He was calm, almost too calm, trying to convince Charlie to meet him outside, promising it would be the last time he would ask. But when Charlie refused, his tone changed in an instant, sharp, cold, and full of threat. "You'll regret this, Charlie," he warned. "You'll regret everything you've done. I'm not going to let you live your life without me." Charlie's face went pale. She ended the call quickly, her hands shaking. Brandon, still sitting beside her, could see the terror in her eyes. He wanted to stay with her, to protect her, but Charlie insisted he go back to the boys' dormitory before anyone found out he had been in the room. Brandon reluctantly agreed, though he felt something was horribly wrong. This wasn't just a relationship falling apart. It was a full-blown obsession, and it was going to get worse. The next morning, the atmosphere at the school was suffocating. Word spread quickly about a tragic incident that had occurred in the dormitory overnight. Charlie and Marna had been found dead. Charlie hanging from the staircase railing, Marna's body found in the bathroom, strangled with a strap from a backpack. Ronnie and Sonia, both frantic with worry and confusion, rushed to the school, hoping against hope that it was a mistake, that their daughter was still alive. But what they found was beyond their worst fears. 2 young lives brutally taken, and the darkness of Xander's obsession had culminated in this devastating act of violence. As news of the death spread, so did confusion and horror. Initially, the police were uncertain whether the 2 girls had taken their own lives. The discovery of their bodies, however, quickly raised suspicions. The marks around their necks didn't match typical signs of suicide, and there was evidence that suggested foul play. The authorities, unsure of the exact nature of the deaths, began a thorough investigation. Principal Richard Hobson was among the first to arrive at the scene, followed closely by the police. With the help of staff members, the school did its best to shield the other students from the gruesome details of the situation. But rumors swirled, and fear crept into every corner of the boarding school. By the time Ronnie and Sonia arrived at the school, they were devastated by the confirmation of their daughter's death. The horror of seeing Charlie's body, lifeless and suspended from the staircase, was too much for her father to bear. He pushed past the police officers who tried to stop him and reached his daughter's body. His grief was palpable, and it was only with the help of his brother, Louis, that the authorities were able to carefully remove Charlie from the railing. The scene was chaotic, with students, teachers, and parents all trying to process the shock. Meanwhile, Marna's father, Stevens, was already voicing his suspicions. He had no doubt in his mind that Xander was involved. His anger was directed not only at the boy he believed had murdered his daughter, but also at the slow pace of the investigation. As the investigation continued, the police began to piece together a troubling timeline of events. They learned that Charlie had been in contact with Xander the night before her death, a fact confirmed by her boyfriend, Brandon. Brandon's account was chilling. He recalled the phone call that Charlie had received from Xander at around 1 a.m. They had all heard Xander's threats loud and clear. Charlie had been terrified. The details of that call, along with the message he had left her earlier that night, made it clear that Xander had become dangerously fixated on her, unable to accept that their relationship had ended. The police were quick to focus on Xander as the primary suspect. His obsession with Charlie had been well documented by those who knew him, including messages he had sent to her, photos, and even journal entries stored on his phone. His behavior had been erratic and threatening ever since their breakup, but now it seemed that he had taken things to a deadly extreme. Despite mounting evidence and witness testimonies, Xander's involvement wasn't immediately clear. The family of the victims, however, was determined to uncover the truth, even if they had to take matters into their own hands. Stevens, Marna's father, was frustrated by the lack of progress and made the fateful decision to confront Xander himself. On the evening of May 25th, just a day after the deaths, Stevens drove to Xander's home to demand answers. He didn't trust the authorities to act fast enough, and his grief-fueled rage led him to believe that Xander held the key to understanding what had happened. At Xander's home, a confrontation between Stevens, Xander, and Xander's father, Monty, quickly escalated into a heated argument. Xander's father tried to intervene, but Stevens's anger was uncontainable. He accused Xander of being directly responsible for the deaths of his daughter and her friend. Just as things seemed to spiral further out of control, private investigator Chris Sanders, who had been hired by the school to assist in the case, arrived on the scene. With calm authority, Sanders managed to de-escalate the situation. He persuaded Xander to accompany him to the police station for questioning. Xander, under pressure, reluctantly agreed, and as he drove to the station with Sanders, the truth would soon come to light. As Xander sat in the car with private investigator Chris Sanders, he was visibly shaken. The weight of the situation was beginning to bear down on him, and Sanders used a methodical, calm approach to apply pressure. Sanders knew how to handle suspects, especially those like Xander, whose fragile emotional state was likely to crack under just the right amount of scrutiny. The drive to the police station was long enough to allow Sanders time to ask pointed questions. Xander initially remained silent, but as the car sped toward the station, the weight of his actions seemed to crush him. Finally, as the tension grew unbearable, Xander broke down. I did it," he muttered, his voice cracking. "I killed her. I killed Charell." The words hung in the air, and Sanders immediately began to gather more details. Xander continued, detailing the events leading up to that fateful night. He spoke of his jealousy, his frustration, and his obsessive need for control. When Charell had broken up with him, it shattered something in Xander. His mind twisted into a dark place, a place where he believed that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Xander confessed that he had snuck into the dormitory in the dead of night. He had used the green nylon rope to hang Charell's body from the staircase, intending to stage her death as a suicide. Afterward, he had gone to Marna's room and killed her too, using a backpack strap to strangle her. He had chosen to murder Marna because she had been a witness, someone who could implicate him if she survived. In a cold, calculated voice, Xander explained how he had hoped to escape suspicion. He believed that if both deaths appeared to be suicides, no one would suspect foul play. He told Sanders that after leaving the dorm, he had felt a twisted sense of relief, thinking that he had managed to take control of the situation, but he hadn't anticipated that things would unravel so quickly. Xander's confession was recorded on Sanders' voice recorder, a critical piece of evidence that would seal his fate. The confession not only confirmed the investigator's suspicions, but also provided insight into his disturbing psychological state. Xander was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for the murders of Charell and Marna. His confession, coupled with the evidence and testimony during the trial, left little doubt about his role in the deaths. Despite his attempts to claim mental instability, the court found that his actions were premeditated, driven by jealousy and obsession. The emotional toll on the families of Charell and Marna was profound, but their fight for justice brought some sense of closure. Charell's parents, Ronnie and Sonia, struggled with the loss of their daughter, but found strength in knowing that her story had been heard. Marna's father, Stevens, was similarly devastated, unable to accept that his daughter's life had been cut short because of Xander's obsession. Xander's family remained divided. His father, Monty, continued to appeal the verdict, but most saw it as an attempt to deny the truth. His mother, who had always been overprotective of him, struggled to comprehend the gravity of his actions, but the reality was undeniable. The case raised uncomfortable questions about obsession, control, and the importance of mental health intervention. Charell and Marna's deaths served as a tragic reminder of how unresolved emotional struggles could lead to devastating outcomes. It also underscored the necessity of recognizing toxic relationships before they spiral out of control. As the years passed, the memory of Charell and Marna lived on. They were remembered not for the tragedy that took their lives, but for the bright futures they had once had, forever intertwined by friendship and love. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our other videos for more captivating stories. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.